Let's talk about Protoss counters to the Ultralisk. So the Zealot is very bad versus the Ultralisk because the Zealot has a low attack value. So each single Zealot attack has 11 damage with full upgrade, while the fully upgraded Ultralisk has 7 armor. So a large part of the Zealot damage is just blocked out. And number 2, the Zealot is a very small unit, so a group of Zealot is always going to receive a lot of splash damage from the Ultralisk. So the Zealot versus the Ultralisk, it's a D tier counter. Next we have the Stalker, and the Stalker is better than the Zealot. The reasons are, number 1, the Stalker has a bonus damage to Armored. That's good. So the Stalker deals 24 damage with full upgrades to the Ultralisk, and the fully upgraded Ultralisk has 7 armor. So this is 17 effective damage per shot. That's not super good, but it's also not bad. So the damage output is okay. And number 2, the Stalker is a unit that is very good at kiting because it is a fast ranged unit with a good range of 6. So the Zealot can always kite the Ultralisk. This requires, however, micro. And also, if you have the blink, you can micro versus the Ultralisk even more. So every time the Ultralisk approaches, you just blink away. And in this way, you can really micro against the Ultralisk. But if you don't micro, the Stalker is very bad. But because of the bonus damage versus Armored and because you can really micro versus the Ultralisk, I'm going to put the Stalker into A tier. Next we have the Sentry, and the Sentry is very bad. It has a very low attack value. I think 4 is the damage or something. So the Sentry deals practically no damage versus the Ultralisk armor. And the spells are also useless because Force Field can be crushed by massive units, and the Ultralisk is massive. And the other spell, Guardian Shield, also does nothing versus the Ultralisk because Guardian Shield only affects ranged attacks. So the Sentry is a D tier unit. And next we have the Adept, and the Adept is also very bad. I mean, it has bonus damage versus light. The Ultralisk is not light. So the Adept does very little damage versus the Ultralisk. Also, the Ultralisk is still armored, so the damage is reduced even more. And also, the Adept is also like a small unit model. So Adepts are always going to take bonus damage from Ultralisks. So I think I'm just also going to put the Adept into D tier. Then we have the Dark Templar. And the Dark Templar is a little bit better than the Zealot or Adept because the Dark Templar has a very high attack value. It starts at 45 and can be upgraded. So the high Ultralisk armor doesn't really do a lot versus the Dark Templar attack. However, the Dark Templar behaves like a Zealot in the sense that it is a small unit. It takes a lot of splash damage from the Ultralisk. But because the Dark Templar has this high attack value that is not as mitigated by armor, I'll have to put it a little bit higher than the Zealot, so I'm going to put it into C tier. Then we have the High Templar, and the High Templar is also very bad. The reason is a Storm deals 80 damage, so the Ultra has 500 HP, so to kill an Ultra with a Storm, you need 7 Storms. And the Ultra also is not a slow unit, so it's unlikely that you get the full 80 damage on an Ultralisk. The Ultralisk will always move out of the Storm, so effectively it would take like 10 Storms or so to kill an Ultralisk. Also, the Templar is quite slow, can be hunted down by the Ultralisk, so it is a D tier counter to the Ultralisk. Then we have the subscribe button. The subscribe button is very strong. I'm going to put it in S tier, because the more videos you watch of this kind, the more stronger you're going to get versus the Ultralisk and also versus other units. Then we have the Archon, and the Archon I think is okay, but it's not super good. I mean, number 1, the Archon has a bonus damage versus biological units, so it deals 35 versus biological units plus upgrades. So the bonus damage versus biological applies to the Ultralisk. Also, the attack value of 35 is high, so the Ultra Armor isn't that effective versus that. On the other hand, the Archon also has splash damage, but because the Ultralisk is such a big chunky unit, the Archon splash doesn't do anything versus the Ultralisk. But this is also reversed the case, so the Ultra splash damage doesn't really do a lot versus the Archon because the Archon is also quite big. So I think it's quite an even fight between these two. I'm going to put the Archon into B tier. Then we have the Immortal, and the Immortal is of course very strong. I mean, it is by far the best ground unit. It has a very high attack versus armored units. The Ultralisk is armored. Then the attack is also very high. It starts at 50, so the Ultra Armor isn't effective versus that. You can kite a little bit. I mean, the Immortal is not the fastest unit, but you can micro it. You can kite a little bit versus the Ultralisk. And the main reason is, of course, the very high attack bonus versus armored units. So the Immortal is going to S tier. Then we have the Warp Prism. And I mean, the Prism is hard to rate because, of course, the Prism itself doesn't do anything versus the Ultralisk because it has no attack. But the Prism can help Stalkers and Immortals to get more damage versus the Ultralisk. And also, if you micro the Immortal and the Stalker with a Prism, these units you can juggle them around and you can really increase the survivability of the Immortal versus the Ultralisk. So the unit itself does nothing versus the Ultra, but it really helps these other units like the Immortal. So I'm just going to put it into B tier. Then we have the Disruptor. The Disruptor in the current patch does only 100 attack versus Zerg units. So you need at least 5 Novas to kill an Ultralisk. In practice, in real game, it's going to be more than 5 because Zerg regenerate also a couple of HP. So you need 6 Novas to kill an Ultralisk. It's very unlikely to get off 6 Novas to 1 Ultralisk because the Ultralisk is also quite fast. It can dodge the Nova. Also, the splash damage doesn't do a lot because Ultra is big. It doesn't take a lot of splash damage. So I'm going to put it also into D tier. Then we have this guy here, the Colossus. The Colossus is also very bad versus the Ultralisk because the Colossus, number one, it has only bonus damage versus light. It doesn't do a lot damage versus the Ultralisk. It also has this double attack. So double attacks are also bad versus armored units because the Ultralisk armor does apply to each of the 2 attacks from the Colossus. The Colossus is also slow. It can get hunted down by the Ultralisk. So I'm going to also put it into D tier. Then we have the air units. We start with the Phoenix. The Phoenix is very bad because the Phoenix has no anti-ground attack. And it also cannot lift the Ultralisk because the Ultralisk is massive. Massive units cannot be lifted. So the Phoenix is a D tier counter to the Ultralisk. Then we have this here, the Oracle. It is a little bit better than the Phoenix because at least it has an anti-ground attack. But the anti-ground attack is very weak versus non-light units. It's also going to do nearly no damage versus the Ultralisk. And it also relies on energy. So I think a full Oracle energy or with 200 energy may even not be enough to kill an Ultralisk because the damage is so low. But it's a little bit better because at least it has an anti-ground attack. So I'm going to put it into C tier. Then we have the Void Ray. The Void Ray is extremely good. It has a huge anti-armor bonus. It deals a lot of damage to the Ultralisk. Also, it's a flying unit, so it cannot be targeted by the Ultralisk itself. So I think this is maybe the strongest unit there is versus the Ultralisk. It really deals a lot of damage. It's a flying unit. It's an S tier unit versus the Ultralisk. Then we have the Tempest. The Tempest is also good. It's not super strong because it doesn't have any bonus damage versus the Ultra. It only has a bonus damage versus building and versus massive ships. This doesn't apply to the Ultralisk, but still the attack value is quite high. I think it's like 30 or 40. So the Ultralisk armor is not really effective versus that. And it's a flying unit, so the Ultralisk cannot hit it. I'm going to put it into A tier. And then we have the carrier. The carrier is technically also a counter to the Ultralisk because it's a flying unit with an anti-ground attack. It can attack the Ultralisk, but the Ultralisk cannot attack back. But still, each single carrier shot has a damage of 8, fully upgraded, while the fully upgraded Ultralisk has an armor of 7. So each interceptor shot does only 1 damage to the Ultralisk. So yes, it is technically a counter, but it takes forever. It really takes forever to kill an Ultralisk with the carrier. But yeah, I'm going to put it into C tier because as an air unit with an anti-ground attack, it technically is a counter, but a weak one, it takes too long. And the mothership also behaves like the carrier. It's a flying unit, so the Ultralisk can't hit it. But the mothership can hit ground. But the attack is only, I think, 8 or something like that, or 6, I don't even know, but it's a weak attack. So a large part of the attack is going to be mitigated by the Ultralisk armor. So it also takes super long to kill an Ultralisk, but with a mothership, I'm also going to put it into C tier, B tier. And alright dudes, that's it. Thanks for watching.